The pen felt unusually heavy in my hand, as if it already knew what that signature was supposed to mean. I sat at the long dining table, staring at the legal document in front of me while my husband, Marcus, leaned back in his chair with a satisfied smile. "Just sign it," he said calmly, like he was asking me to pass the salt. "If you don't, I'll make sure this divorce drags on for years." "You know I can." I looked at him for a moment. The man I had once trusted with my life now spoke like an enemy who was certain of victory. There was no warmth in his eyes, only confidence. Confidence that I was trapped. So I signed, no argument, no tears, just my name at the bottom of the page. Then I placed my keys beside the document, stood up, and walked out of the penthouse I had paid for, furnished, and turned into a home, without looking back even once. Marcus thought that moment broke me. What he didn't know was that by the very next morning, his own attorney would be screaming at him over the phone, asking how he could have been so careless. But that part came later. This story really began 6 years earlier, on a night that felt magical at the time. I met Marcus at a charity gala in downtown Seattle. I was 32, freshly promoted to lead architect at a top design firm, finally feeling like all those sleepless nights and 80-hour workweeks had been worth it. I was confident, independent, and, if I'm being honest, lonely. Marcus approached me near the silent auction tables. He was charming, dressed perfectly, and spoke with the kind of confidence that made people lean in. He told me about his tech startup, how it was going to revolutionize the construction industry, how investors were lining up. Looking back now, the red flags were everywhere. He dropped names constantly but never explained what his product actually did. When I asked specific questions, he answered vaguely. He insisted we always split the bill because quality matters. Though I later learned his credit cards were already maxed out. But at the time, none of that mattered. Marcus made me feel seen. He remembered my favorite wine. He asked about my projects and actually listened. When I forgot to eat during long days at the office, he showed up with lunch and a smile. After years of putting my career before everything else, that attention felt intoxicating. 18 months later, we were married. My mother wasn't there to see it. She had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving me 3 things that mattered more than money ever could: her vintage watch from the 1950s, a collection of watercolor paintings she had created throughout her life, and a handwritten letter telling me never to let anyone dim my light. The first year of marriage was peaceful. Marcus talked endlessly about his next big move, and I didn't mind covering most of our expenses while he worked on building his future. Partnerships require sacrifice, right? By the second year, his startup collapsed. Investors pulled out. Marcus blamed everyone but himself. I held him while he cried and quietly paid off the $30,000 in debt he had accumulated without telling me. By the 3rd year, there was another company. Then another. Each one needed funding. Each one failed. Meanwhile, I was promoted to partner at my firm, earning more than I ever had in my life. Marcus, on the other hand, was earning excuses. By the 4th year, he stopped pretending to work at all. And that was when the truth began to surface. I thought the worst thing Marcus could do was fail me as a husband. I was wrong, because one Tuesday evening, a single notification on his phone revealed a betrayal far more calculated, and far more dangerous, than I ever imagined. The message he never meant me to see. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening. The kind that blends into every other workday when life feels routine and predictable. Marcus had come home late, mumbling something about a meeting that ran long, then disappeared into the shower. His phone was on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious. At least not yet. Then the screen lit up. A notification appeared from a name I didn't recognize, Sophia, followed by a small red heart. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, baby. Wear the shirt I bought you." My stomach dropped. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen, hoping I was misunderstanding something obvious. Maybe a coworker. Maybe a joke. Maybe anything except what my instincts were screaming at me. But instincts are rarely wrong. I picked up the phone. The moment I unlocked it, the truth spilled out faster than I could process it. Message after message. Photos. Voice notes. Inside jokes. 6 months worth of conversations that painted a very clear picture. 6 months of, "I miss you." 6 months of, "She doesn't understand me like you do." 6 months of plans. One message stopped me cold. "Once the divorce is done and I get my share, we'll never have to worry about money again." Divorce. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning my exit. My hands shook as I scrolled further. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Something colder settled in my chest, a sharp, focused clarity. I searched her name online, Sophia Chen, an Instagram influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers. Her page was filled with designer bags, luxury trips, and carefully staged photos of a perfect life. Then I noticed something familiar. In one photo, she was adjusting her hair, smiling at the camera. On her wrist was my mother's vintage watch. The same watch I thought I had misplaced months earlier. The room started to spin. That watch wasn't just jewelry. It was one of the last things my mother had touched. I remembered her wearing it while painting, while cooking, while laughing. And now it was being flaunted online by a stranger who had stolen it with my husband's help. I wanted to confront Marcus immediately. I wanted answers. I wanted to break something, anything. Instead, I took screenshots, every message, every photo, every detail. I emailed everything to myself, then placed the phone back on the counter exactly where it had been. That night, Marcus climbed into bed like nothing was wrong. He kissed my forehead and fell asleep within minutes. I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, replaying every lie I had believed over the past 6 years. Every excuse, every late night, every missing item I had brushed off. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. The next morning, I called the one person I trusted completely, my college roommate, Helen. We hadn't spoken in months, but she answered on the second ring. "I need help," I said. "And I need you to keep this quiet." By that afternoon, I was sitting in her office, laying out the screenshots, the financial records, and the growing list of things that had gone missing from my home. Helen listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Don't confront him," she said calmly. "Not yet." That was the moment I stopped being heartbroken and started being strategic. Marcus thought I was still the loyal wife who would cry, forgive, and move on. What he didn't know was that every lie he told was now documented, saved, and ready to be used. Letting him believe he had won. From the moment Helen told me not to confront Marcus, everything changed. I stopped asking questions. I stopped reacting. I went back to playing the role he expected, the busy wife, emotionally exhausted, too distracted to notice anything beyond her work deadlines. Marcus mistook my silence for weakness. Behind the scenes, Helen and I were working carefully, methodically. The goal wasn't revenge. It was protection. And the first rule was simple: never let Marcus suspect anything. The penthouse was the most valuable asset, so that's where we started. Helen helped me transfer it into a revocable living trust, legally established as my separate property. I had purchased it years before meeting Marcus, using inheritance money from my mother. The paperwork was extensive, dull, and buried inside documents Marcus never bothered to read. Next came my business interests. My partners agreed to restructure my ownership stake, ensuring it remained protected as separate property. Everything was done by the book, signed, and finalized. Then I documented everything Marcus had ever taken, every credit card charge, every loan to one of his failed companies, every missing piece of jewelry, every expense disguised as an investment. The most difficult part was installing security cameras throughout the penthouse. They were hidden in plain sight, disguised as smoke detectors. They recorded video only, completely legal. What they captured confirmed everything. Marcus bringing Sophia into my home while I was at work. Sophia opening my drawers like they belonged to her. Both of them laughing as they sorted through my belongings. One video showed Sophia trying on my mother's pearl earrings, joking that I had too much stuff anyway. Another showed them carefully removing 3 of my mother's watercolor paintings from the wall and carrying them out to her car. When I came home that evening and saw the empty spaces where those paintings had hung for years, my knees nearly gave out. I called Marcus immediately. "Have you seen my mom's paintings?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Oh, those," he said without hesitation. "I donated them. They were kind of depressing." That word, depressing, cut deeper than any insult he'd ever thrown at me. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until my chest ached. Then I washed my face, reapplied my makeup, and continued with the plan. A few weeks later, Marcus came to me with confidence I hadn't seen in years. He had spoken to a lawyer. "I'm entitled to half of everything," he announced. "The penthouse, your business, and spousal support until I get back on my feet." I argued. I cried. I begged him to reconsider. Then I gave in. "Fine," I said quietly. "But my attorney needs you to sign this acknowledgement first. It's just paperwork." Marcus barely skimmed the document. He was already texting Sophia about celebrating once the divorce was finalized. He signed. What he didn't know was that buried deep in the legal language was a clause stating he had already received full and final compensation for any claims related to marital assets. 3 days later, I signed my own document, one that looked like I was giving up the penthouse. In reality, it meant absolutely nothing. And Marcus had no idea what was about to happen next. Marcus believed the penthouse was finally his. He believed I had surrendered. But the morning after I walked out, he would learn just how expensive that belief was, because nothing in that home would respond to him ever again. When the truth finally collected its debt, the morning after I left, Marcus woke up in the penthouse believing it finally belonged to him. The silence confused him at first. No greeting from the smart home system, no lights turning on at his voice command. When he tried again, louder this time, nothing happened. The system no longer recognized him. Annoyed, Marcus went to make coffee. The machine wouldn't turn on. He checked the breaker, then his phone. No alerts, no access. I had removed him from every connected system the night before. Frustration turned to panic when he tried to leave. His car wouldn't start. It was registered in my name, paid for with my money, and remotely disabled through an app he didn't know existed. He called for a ride, only to discover his credit cards were being declined. Every account tied to him had been separated or frozen. Then he tried calling Sophia. She didn't answer. That was because Sophia was busy answering her own door. Earlier that morning, the police arrived at her apartment with a warrant. My attorney had filed a report supported by video evidence showing stolen property being removed from my home. They found everything. My mother's vintage watch, her pearl earrings, an emerald ring that had belonged to my grandmother, and all three of my mother's watercolor paintings, leaning against the wall like trophies. Sophia was charged with possession of stolen property and conspiracy. Her carefully curated online life unraveled within hours. Brands cut ties. Followers disappeared. Her comments section turned hostile. Marcus learned all of this later that day, right after he was served with legal papers. Helen had filed a civil suit for conversion of property, fraud, and unjust enrichment. We were seeking full restitution for everything he had taken or given away, plus damages. His lawyer reviewed the documents Marcus had signed over the previous 6 months and reportedly lost his composure. That was the phone call Marcus received, the one where his own attorney shouted at him for signing away his rights without reading the fine print. You don't own the penthouse. You don't own her business. And now you're facing civil and criminal exposure, the lawyer told him. How did you miss this? Marcus called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat in a hotel suite overlooking the city skyline, sipping champagne while Helen called with updates. Every piece of my mother's property had been recovered. Sophia was out on bail, facing serious charges. Marcus's legal future looked grim. 6 weeks later, the divorce was finalized. Marcus received nothing. In fact, the court ordered him to pay restitution for additional items he had taken over the years, things he assumed I'd never notice. Sophia accepted a plea deal. Her influencer career never recovered. Marcus moved back in with his mother, his reputation permanently attached to court records and search results. I returned to the penthouse. I rehung my mother's paintings. I placed her watch back in the safe beside her handwritten letter, and for the first time in years, I let myself grieve, not just for my marriage, but for the time I had spent protecting someone who never deserved it. This wasn't revenge. It was accountability. I didn't destroy Marcus. I simply stopped shielding him from the consequences of his own choices. And without me to catch him, he fell on his own. If you see yourself in this story, remember this: silence is not weakness. Sometimes it's preparation. Document everything. Protect what's yours. And never let anyone convince you that standing up for yourself is cruelty, because walking away with your life intact isn't revenge. It's justice.